Spoilers for Yakuza 8 and Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii ahead. Part 1, The Overlord. Bryce Fairchild. This guy ain't like your other villains in the Like a Dragon franchise. We've had a total irredeemable scumbags like Iwami, pure corruption in the law like Munakata, and bad guys that can be redeemed like Yamai or Hamazaki, but we've had nothing like the total overlord that is Bryce Fairchild. Bryce is unique. He's on a scale unlike any before. While Ryoyoki was an overlord, in the spotlight hiding behind an identity, Bryce worked under a cult hidden in plain sight. One that had total control over other powerful factions in the island state that was his own kingdom. One that even bore him immortality with bizarre stones found by pirates centuries ago. With all this in mind, Bryce becomes a villain that feels overwhelming and mystical. I mean, this guy had a nearly kaiju-sized squid living in his basement. I don't have money for something like that. If I could describe Bryce's role as the Overlord in Yakuza 8's plot, or Infinite Wealth, I'd say it's actually quite clever. The very opening of Yakuza 8 tells you all you need to know. When Lanny's grandparents are killed by a younger Bryce shooting them, and steals what he believed was the real Palakana pendant, it sets the stage that Bryce would do anything to cement total control. And wouldn't you know, the reveal was Bryce wouldn't happen until much later in the story. It's a scene earlier in the story, this killing, that echoes who would be the final boss. For Bryce, it was the opening. For his co-star Abina, it was the flashback to old man Arakawa murdering the Yakuza clan that took his wife and child away. That burst of revenge with Arakawa set a precedent for Abina's actions later on, that total bloodlust. And then, for Bryce, his murder in the opening during the rain and that car in Hawaii showed how a guy with his influence can get away with any truth he wants, even if it means doing anything to keep his skeletons in his closet. Part 2, The Cult. Anything can become a cult if we're not careful. Whether it's a government, a military, a society, a business, a fandom, or a religious organization as seen in Infinite Wealth, a cult is a possible fate for any group. Lots of things must be done in moderation, and that applies to spending time listening to people that think they know all the answers. That's how guys like Bryce Fairchild get into power. Infinite Wealth introduces Palakana and the Haku rank as a benevolent community wanting to give back to Hawaiians and anyone in need of help. It's a nice way to ease us into this new organization by showing their purpose, this actual purpose, and their ties to this new, unique setting. Think about the baseball team in Hiroshima, or how in Yakuza 5 we had the taxi business in Fukuoka, something like that, and that applies here with Palakana. Then enter Bryce, who seemingly has the power to explode a handgun and a pair of holy angel wings in the form of the bird Wings mural. We see Bryce acting friendly to Ichiban's crew and even teaching the next generation of Palakana kids the virtues of their religion. Now, I'm sure most of us saw this coming from a mile away once we saw him in the scene that Bryce would, be the overlord figure we've heard about in Honolulu's underworld. However, I'd wager that an obvious twist doesn't diminish a villain's status, since Bryce is still constantly pulling the strings from then on for all the foes in Team Ichiban's way. Whether it's the Barracudas, the Ganzei, any other gang in Hawaii, or working with the Seiru clan in Japan, Bryce certainly made himself known and clear that he's the one sage they all look up to when business needs to be made. But how exactly does he do that? Well, it's with his devoted followers, of course. These guys are essentially plants in every criminal organization in Honolulu, meaning Bryce has eyes and ears everywhere. One of my favorite parts of Yakuza 8 was the long battles that took place in the streets when Team Ichiban is trying to hide from the onslaught of Palakana followers and normal gangster attires. Well, I'm sure most of these guys were just gangsters taking up the bounty to find Lanny and Ichiban's birth mother Akane. It's interesting to imagine who was a devoted Palakana member and who wasn't. So Bryce Fairchild is clearly a real scumbag, and having his own compound island in the form of Nele Island, named after the goddess of their religion, draws similarities to a plethora of evil guys in real life that have islands. You can fill in those names yourself, but my advice to you is to just never buy an island for yourself. Don't do it. Instead, spend that money on someone you care about, even if it means buying a pink truckload full of stamina and sparks. Part 3. The Persona. People like attention. They want to be seen as someone with power, glory, and all the riches. It's something many countries in power are dealing with to this day. Everything's a show these days for some reason. It reminds you of the things you'd see as satire in the original RoboCop films, except sadly, it's not satire here in real life. And not to mention all the social media platforms we have, make it so anyone can technically become some sort of celebrity. For Bryce Fairchild, you can parallel this with Chitose Fujinomiya and her VTuber persona, Hisoka Tatara. These two characters may not seem directly tied to each other at first, yet by the time that ending cutscene with Bryce plays out, following his boss fight, we see Chitose lament how she was strong-armed into turning the Tatara persona into something she was never originally envisioned it to be. And now she can finally just stream to the world as herself, a real person, and expose everything that Bryce has done, with a full display of nuclear waste in the background. The fact that someone who had an internet persona ended up owning who they are in real life speaks wonders compared to the guy who lived a complete facade through and through, as Bryce's sage display was just a lie that corrupted him and everyone who believed in him. People join groups thinking they've found a community. However, once you enter a community, it can be easy to give in to their dark sides collectively. That desire, that longing for a community of apparent understanding is what gave Bryce his power. Then there's the aspect of his apparent immortality, that mysticism I brought up earlier. While kept vague in Yakuza 8 and added intrigue to the mysterious nature of Bryce, we'd actually learn a year later in Pirate Yakuza that he had access to an ambergris, or Heart of the Dragon, that adds a couple more years to your life once you keep taking it. The old man in Pirate Yakuza, who never speaks, is shown in a photo drinking tea with Bryce, with the sacred stone thingy right in the picture, and sadly, that old fart took the secret to his grave, and never gave it to his wife or son. What a bastard. That old man's son, however, would actually turn out to be Rodriguez, the last leader of the Haku on Nele Island, and would eventually become a real bro for the Team Goro Pirates. I gotta say, I never thought I'd be rooting for this guy, but what do I know? Rodriguez shows up and tells us that not everyone in the antagonist group is a bad person per se, and in classic RPG fashion, we get to see his side of the story as someone who truly believes in Nele and Palicana as a whole, meaning there's still hope for the group despite the Bryce debacle. So, having Rodriguez still standing, plus that Lanny is now the current leader of the mainline part of Palicana, there's still hope for the organization. Part 4, Finale, versus the Dragon Koi. Bryce versus Ichiban. Climactic part of Ichiban's story in Yakuza 8, besides the scene of Eiji. No, Bryce didn't have any tattoo or Irizumi, of course, making it a first in the franchise that an inked protagonist final antagonist in a story doesn't have a classic tattoo showdown at all. There was no Tendo equivalent for Ichiban in this game. And you know what, that's okay. I'm not going to give Bryce the unique points or that distinction, but instead because he ties back into Ichiban's origin. The parts of the coin locker baby twist in 7 that left some things vague paid off in 8, where we learn that Ichiban's birth mother Akane didn't die by the Yakuza after all, and instead fled back to Hawaii to work for the Palicana. That connection alone, from the search to find Akane throughout the game, and Lanny to the heartfelt finally Ichiban and his mom can meet moment on the beach with Ichiban and Akane, made the final fight with Bryce that much more personal for Old Lord Shrub. So while Ichiban's final bosses seem to be going the route of no Irizumis, but still represent some kind of antithesis to his morals and core being, And I still think that's fascinating as a concept. It makes Ichiban stand out more compared to Kiryu, especially since Majima's final bosses follow a similar through line. Kiryu's final foes also Irezumi that contrast against his in some way, or can be a polar opposite of sorts. For Majima, his final foes are completely weapon-based, and normally pure evil in a cartoony way. For Ichiban, his final foes represent some overwhelming odds or dark ideas that threaten to swallow an entire population that just wants to have a decent future for themselves. That's the route I imagine Ichiban's final boss is heading. I have faith that RGD can come up with fresh villains for Ichiban to fight in future installments, no matter how big and convoluted each game can be. And for Bryce Fairchild himself, I'm okay that he didn't have a sad ending like Masato Arakawa did in 7, because that was referenced here and built upon with AG instead. So instead we got a new kind of foe, a supremely evil overlord that had no redeeming qualities and instead based his entire life on impersonation and stealing immortality from everyone. A guy quite literally hiding on a secret island with radiation, a cult of devoted followers, and a legit kaiju or two with the squid and shark protecting him. If that isn't a crazy foe perfect for a kind-hearted and sincere goofball like Ichiballs, then I don't know what is, man. Thank you guys for watching. I've been Mr. Tiger Drop Films, and let me know in the comments what you thought of this Bryce guy. Did you call in Andre Richardson to help fight him? Until next time, let me know, and stay tuned, and be sure to kick some ass. Peace.